Good evening, everyone. This is the Thursday night edition of Miss Hampson's highlights from Huckleberry Finn. We're up to chapter 24 at this point, which was the homework due today, chapters 24 and 25. And I wanted to point out some things to you that would hopefully help you out with some of the things in the reading. At the start of chapter 24, we can see that with the Duke and the King having taken over the raft, Jim is being forced back into a slave's position. We find out at the very beginning of chapter 24 that anytime they need to leave Jim at the raft, they tie him up to make it look as though he is a captured runaway slave. And Jim is very unhappy with this. So the Duke and the King decide, okay, well, we'll change things around for you. We'll let you have this ridiculous costume where they make him wear these ridiculous clothes. They paint him blue. And even Huck comments that it's one of the most horrible things he's ever seen, that Jim just looks terrible. But Jim even says, you know what, this is better than being tied up. And that's quite a bit of commentary in and of itself, because he looks ridiculous. Huck is disturbed seeing him dressed up like this against his will. And even that scene is better than being chained to the raft. So Jim is definitely not in good shape right now with the Duke and the King having taken over the raft. So further down into chapter 24, we know that the king is looking for his next con, and he discovers that there is a family nearby, the Wilkes family. They are waiting for their uncles to arrive from England. They're waiting for Harvey and William Wilkes to arrive from England because this family just lost their uncle Peter, who basically became their father when their actual father, George, had passed away. Side note, I posted this note on Classroom in the assignment for today, and I'll do it again for tomorrow. I'll post it on the general feed as well if it's helpful. For chapters 24 through 29 of Huck Finn, the Wilkes family is very important. There are some chapters where we encounter characters that Twain just throws in for one chapter and they're gone, but there are other characters that go through multiple chapters and they're incredibly important, and the Wilkes family would be a collection of characters that fits in that category. So if you reference the sheet that I posted in the lesson for you, you'll see that the four brothers of the Wilkes family, we got Peter, George, Harvey, and William. Peter is the one that just died. So Uncle Peter is the one that just died, leaving a large inheritance to his three nieces, to Mary Jane, who's 19, Susan, who's 15, and Joanna, who's 14. When their father, George, died, Uncle Peter became their caretaker. So these girls were very close with their uncle. They have never met Uncle Harvey. They have never met Uncle William. They've never been to America. So it's when the king discovers that this family is waiting for their long-lost relatives to arrive, Harvey and William, the king realizes, hey, these kids and this family, they don't know what these uncles look like. Let's pretend to be the uncles. And so Harvey, who really is a preacher who lives in England, the king is going to play the role of Harvey and pretend to be Harvey. And the Duke is going to play the role of William. And it's important to note that William is unable to speak. He's a mute brother. So he's only going to be like signing things or attempting to sign things to the king, who's playing the role of Harvey. And the Duke is going to be silenced throughout much of this episode, where the king is going to take over as this preacher Harvey. All right. So keeping this in mind, this family is going through a really, really tough time. Mary Jane, Susan, and Joanna, they lose their dad a few years earlier. Their Uncle Peter just passed away. And these girls and the remaining family members, they're desperate for a connection. So the king and the Duke, being the upstanding guys that they are, sarcasm intended, decide to take full advantage of this opportunity and pose as the long-lost brother. So here's the king pretending to be Uncle Harvey, and because the people don't know what he looks like, they embrace him. They think he really is Uncle Harvey, and they hug him. He's crying and carrying on. Huck is so disgusted with what he sees at the end of chapter 24. He says, well, the men gathered around and sympathized with them and said all sorts of kind things to them and carried their carpet bags up the hill for them and let them lean on them and cry and told the king, who they believe is Harvey, and told the king all about his brother's last moments. And the king, he told it all over again on his hands to the Duke, who's playing the role of William. And both of them took on, they were so sad about the dead Tanner. That's a reference to Uncle Peter, who just died, like they'd lost the 12 disciples. Huck, again, is so disgusted with what he says, what he's seeing, excuse me. He says, well, if I ever struck anything like it, I'm an N. It was enough to make a body ashamed of the human race. Big deal, huge deal that Huck says this. Huck has witnessed a lot of disgusting things on this trip so far. He's seen violence, he's seen thieves, he's seen all sorts of things. He sees what the Duke and the King, what they're doing right now. He thinks it's truly despicable. He's never in his life even conceived of anything this horrible before. And he says it makes a body ashamed of the human race. That's important. Twain wants us to really think about the Duke and the King and this con that they're pulling. Into chapter 25, the Duke and the King are now accepting their new roles, playing these roles of the long-lost uncles. Again, the King is playing the role of Harvey, who's supposed to be a preacher. And we know that the Duke is going to be playing the role of William, who's unable to speak. So the Duke won't be speaking. He'll be attempting to sign things to Harvey, to the King, who's playing the role of Harvey. So when they get into this, the Wilkes' home, there's already, people are mourning. They're grieving over the loss of this Uncle Peter. They see his coffin. It's probably the wake where, or like sitting Shiva, where you are paying respects to the family. The body of the deceased would be there. And this is a very serious time for this family. They're in mourning, they're grieving, and the Duke and the King decide to take full advantage. So think about how gross, disgusting this is, that they're taking advantage of innocent people that are at their most vulnerable point. They've lost a loved one in their family. And Huck is so annoyed by this that he says the King is leaking, like he's attempting to cry, but just disgusting things that he's never witnessed before. Terrible, really just making a mockery of these poor people that are have lost their loved one. Huck again comments, I never see anything so disgusting. He can't believe the Duke and the King are pulling this, pretending to be the long lost uncles. Further into this chapter, we discover that Uncle Peter, so he's the one that just passed away, Uncle Peter left a lot of money for his nieces, a lot, like $6,000. Once again, $6,000 comes up in the story, which is kind of interesting, given how the story starts with Huck giving up $6,000. Anyway, so Peter has also left property and money for Harvey and William, but he has set aside specific money for his nieces because he knows they're essentially orphaned at this point. They need money. And the Duke and the King discover this money is in the cellar, of the home, and they decide to count it up, make sure the $6,000, that it's all there. They find out they're actually short some money. I think it's $415, I believe, approximately. And they decide to make up the difference with the money that they've stolen from the people from the Royal Nonsuch, like that ridiculous con that they had where they screwed up Shakespeare. So after counting up the money that really belongs to the girls, they go upstairs and they do this whole grand show of like, here's the $6,000, for the girls, because they're trying to seem like they're such wonderful uncles handing over this money. The girls embrace them. They really believe these are their uncles. And it's really very upsetting because it appears that these awful con men, the Duke and the King, are going to swindle these orphan girls for everything that they have, just steal everything. It's disgusting. So in amongst all of this, Mark Twain is probably thinking, hey, reader, I'm stressing you out with a truly more than unhappy, uncomfortable thing to read. So what does Mark Twain do? He throws in some comic relief. I'm really hoping that you picked up on this very bizarre humor because it's hilarious. So towards the end, but right before Dr. Robinson confronts the frauds, the King says, let's see, Well, first, the king keeps insisting that the deceased, the diseased, excuse me, the diseased. It's so sad that the diseased is not here. He means to be saying deceased, and he's mispronouncing it, which is important because it's sort of a setup for the next really embarrassing thing that the king is going to mispronounce. So the next thing the king says is, the king was saying in the middle of something he'd started in on, so it's right here. They being particular friends of the diseased, again, he means deceased, but he's saying diseased. That's why they're invited here this evening. But tomorrow we want all to come, everybody, for he, Uncle Peter, respected everybody. He liked everybody. So it's fitting that his funeral orgies should be public. I'm going to let you talk amongst yourselves about what that word means. That is not the appropriate word to use here, and Twain knows it, and he puts it in here to make the king look like an idiot. So it continues, and so the king went on mooning on and on, just sounding like an idiot, liking to hear himself talk, and every little while he fetched in his funeral orgies again. Wrong word, people. Really inappropriate word. Till the Duke, he couldn't stand it no more. So he writes on a little scrap of paper, "Obsequies, you old fool." And the Duke folds it up, goes to goo-gooing and reaching it over people's heads to him. So remember, the Duke can't jump in and say anything. He's playing the role of William, who's supposed to be mute, unable to speak. He can only pass notes to the king. So the Duke knows he's saying the wrong word. He's like, "You mean obsequies." This is the word regarding funeral rites, not orgies, which means something entirely different. Anyway, so it continues, but it's kind of funny. It continues where the king won't let go of what he said. The king is using the wrong word, and now he's digging a bigger hole for himself. And this is Twain's, oh my gosh, humor. I think really he drives it home here, and I'm hoping you find this hilarious. The king says, "I say orgies not because it's the common term, because it ain't, obsequies being the common term, but because orgies is the right term. Obsequies ain't used in England no more now. It's gone out. We say we say orgies in England. Orgies is better because it means the thing you're after more exact. It's the word that's made up out of the Greek orgo, outside, open, abroad, and Hebrew gisem, to plant, cover up, hence inter. So you see, funeral orgies is an open or public funeral. Even Huck knows he's using the wrong words, and Huck's thinking to himself, this was the worst I ever struck. He sounds like an idiot. So because this is a school podcast or a school screencastify, we're not really going to go into detail about what these words mean, but talk amongst yourselves. Again, this is completely not the right word to be saying. And the king won't let it go. So he gets confronted at one point. And Dr. Robinson is just like, "You're an idiot. You're not from England. That's the worst accent I've ever heard." And what's interesting here is that when Dr. Robinson confronts the Duke and the King, the townspeople, they are so desperate to believe that the Duke and the King actually are Harvey and William that they just accept the lies and they turn their back on Dr. Robinson, which is interesting because they've known Robinson for a while. And they've chosen to turn their back on him and instead embrace the frauds. So it's just kind of interesting that Twain is showing again how easily people were taken advantage of at that time. And perhaps maybe today, when people are still very desperate, they are maybe more prone to believe a con artist if the con artist is saying something that sounds good to them, sounds like something that they want. So anyway. All right, guess who made a podcast that was too long again, or a screencastify? Yes, that would be me, Miss Hampson. So I'm going to sign off and hope you guys have a great Thursday night. And I will talk to you guys again tomorrow. And don't forget to check Classroom. Important information regarding our new schedule starting on Monday. This is Miss Hampson, and have a great night. Bye.